A man in his zone there, boy. A man in his zone. Taurean, I thought you pull up a jungle tune there, you know, from the.
He sung that good. He sung that good. What's up, gentlemen?
What's up? Good night, villagers. Good morning, good evening, good night, and welcome to another edition of the Heights Room. I'm here with the original prankster, Taurean Linton, and the Caribbean yogi, Shankarah Lessie. Fellas, how are they doing? What's up?
I did. Anxious for my second dose. Things getting live here now.
You ain't get your second one yet?
No, dog.
No, you get a little fire. You get a little fire. But don't worry, it's a purification kind of fire.
Nah, it'll come soon. My parents get them one, them get them second dose, them get the AstraZeneca.
The Astro.
The Astro. So they get that, they're good. So yeah, just me, just waiting, watching everybody get. So what's he seeing on all the end?
Well, see our man trying to thief Juve. Like what going on? So, social media was lit with Killmonger trying to kill off Juve apparently, and you know, he was called out. He was called out for cultural appropriation, and there are a lot of different views on this. I mean, I think it's kind of split down the middle, if you ask me, from what I've been seeing. But at the same time, maybe that's just on my end. For some people, I think it's all, you know, a case of cultural appropriation. Leslie, what is your thoughts on this Juve rum?
That, I mean, is a rum that a lot of celebrities, I think, trying to seeing value in, you know, Caribbean branding and that kind of thing. I noticed DJ Khaled did something similar with Ciroc, some brands of Ciroc that he did, some mango flavor, and you know, you could see kind of dabbling a little bit in the Caribbean vibe and things. So I think it was not more than a business decision from them fellas' side, but I just glad, you know, everybody jump up and let him know, well, you know, not everything you could, you know, you can't jump on everything. But
yeah, because
the man was reasonable from what I understand, you know?
Yeah, because I think put in some Caribbean tinge flavors. It's Ciroc. Ciroc is the brand.
Right.
People's issue would have been that, you know, the word Juve is something very specific to our culture. It's very meaningful to our culture, and that it would only make sense that something that is going on a big scale, from you know, that side of things, where, you know, big business side of things, that is going to be called Juve, should in some way be directly linked to us. You know, if he was somebody like, you know, who normally frequents Carnival and has ties with certain mass bands or some kind of thing, then people will be like, oh, he's ambassador. You know, he's one of our ambassadors. We know him, but he has never been. He has never been seen as that, and I think people kind of went on a kind of like, so how we just jump out just so. But again, I think legally too, you know, we have to understand that if he uses the word Juve within America, it's not like if we can't use it here for any product here as well. So it's a kind of, I think people need to be educated about the logistics.
Yeah, you see,
as well.
The patent thing does work. You understand? It has no patent for Juve registered copyright or anything.
Trademark. I think it's the word.
Yeah. I believe
copyright. So the copyright is a little different. So the trademark is when it's not registered with the copyright board of the US, and copyright is when you actually go through the US Patent Office. They do a public, they publish it publicly, It's similar to letters of administration, where they would publish it publicly and give people an opportunity to say, well, no, I have claim to that too as well, and that kind of thing. And then when it go through that process, then the U.S. Patent Office will stamp it and say, well, okay, you're copyrighted. And at that time, you could put R, the R circle. That's what that registered means. See, copyright registered. Trademark mean you ain't get it yet, but it's in the process. You understand?
Right.
So maybe in the process of it. So but I just find it a little strange doing that. What if Angostura had jump out with our brand with that on so bad?
But Angostura, as far as I see, when he take a picture and thing, he had to Angostura Becca's bottle.
Yeah, but they said they're not linked to it. He just put that in it.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They say they're not linked to it. If Angostura did it, it's not Angostura's make bitters. Angostura's down here, so the tied to us now. This wasn't tied to us. It was bigging us up, but it wasn't tied to us. So like.
But what about as what you're saying, it wasn't tied to us, but shouldn't we have put out an olive branch, so to speak, to make sure it tied to us in that way? I think a lot of people are upset about that. We could have do that instead of fighting down the man. We could have joined the wave and ride it for as long as we could.
Well, I guess all that is up for debate. Blinks, who was on the podcast in the earlier episodes, Blinks is a IP expert, and he has a lot of things that he could say. So probably at a later point we'll bring him on and probably talk about this in depth, because there's a article he did on it. I will see if I can get it to you guys. All right, moving on from that now, we have Barbados begins reopening process with high technology. So let's see a little bit about this. Who could fall in on this? Jesse, take it away.
Yeah, well, I mean, what it is that they start the process. Them, it seemed like them is one of the first out of these tables in the Caribbean to really start to, normalizing and that kind of thing. And in doing that, they're doing it with proper technology. They have something called BIM Safe. BIM Safe. Yeah, so BIM Safe.
So they're opening back their borders pretty much. That's what
they're opening back their borders, but they're doing it with some strong technology. So you're basically getting something like a FETBAN, but it have like QR codes and all them barcode and all them things to actually track you where you're going. Let me see. It gives you a travel. So you have to install the app on your phone, the BIM Safe app.
Right.
That with the ban basically allows you, that thing right there. So it basically streamlining your whole travel experience. You're getting online ed form, self-assessment, dashboard, telling you where health centers is, testing requirements, approved hotels, local protocols, travel. It's an external Neuralink.
No, but it's pretty impressive. It's pretty impressive. You roll things like this out. I mean, this is the age we live in. You roll something like this out. This is how you're going to be able to monitor. I mean, again, it might, on a large scale, it might not apply to everyone as easily if you have a mass influx of people like repatriation and so on in Trinidad. When we open our borders, there's going to be all kind of people coming. They mightn't have the phone to put it on the app and all kind of. You don't even know, right? But this is really impressive. I would say this is really, really impressive.
I would hope Trinidad will take lessons learned though, in terms of once it is we decide to go to reopen and thing, that we have something similar, because it could do nothing but help cut. That was
definitely. No, definitely. It pretty much have to be done. I think if we don't do this too, then it have to be done. Yeah.
I don't know. I think this all these
data.
Exactly.
Philip Alexander.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, I think that given the gravity of the situation and the fact that we have a problem with management of things in an efficient manner in Trinidad, and it seems that there's always that lack of the use of the technology that keeps back the improvement of these processes. It can only do good, as you're saying, and all with the data and so on. Hopefully, that's how when you put it on, you can take it off at some point. You know what I mean? But that I guess when you reach that point,
I think it have an opportunity here. What I'm saying, Cutter, is that while yes, and we keep bringing this in the heights room, transfer the risk to the person best designed to handle it. Understand that this is not something that Ian Allen or somebody in the Ministry of Health have to take. Partner with Digicel, partner with B Mobile, get the private sector involved. you know what I mean, they would be able to handle a risk on something like this really good, open it up, liberalize the industry, allow people to come and private sector to participate, and then you could have something as efficient as that, I think, running. So I think it's an opportunity for something like that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Again,
maybe,
we can only hope. We can only wait and see, brother. Now on the flip side, where we have opening up in Barbados, right here at home, is just close, and more closed down. Right. So what we going on is popular Barataria alignment spot closes and up for sale. Popular Barataria Banaris on the avenue has decided not to reopen its establishment. It is now up for sale. After great consideration, we announced the sale of our property, inclusive of the bar. Owner Ram Singh Lala said yesterday his decision to sell the decades-old establishment is not about financial woes related to closures within the COVID-19 restrictions. He said it is putting family first. So, I don't know.
The hard boycott, boy.
To me, it screams that, if it wasn't for the situation, so it would not have happened.
You think he's trying nothing?
I don't know. I have no clue.
I know we should fight on the man. The man give you reason. You want to close. You must be fed up. What about the happen is, you get time to sit down home and relax because COVID. And realize like, yo, me and need that headache to run business. No, you got to worry about people coming to rob you. You got to stay up all night. All that kind of thing. And he must say, yo, let me lock up this thing here and take it easy, sell it, and he retire. Who knows? He might leave Trinidad and
well, that goes to show you too, how much the situation change. It change everybody take on the day-to-day activities of what is life now. You know what I mean? When a man making money every day, and I know there's the cog in the machine running. Is when you really rock back and say, watch now, I living, I breathing, I'm merely bound to do this right through. So because the man says he's missing half of his life, always had to study, walk with the business. So I mean, it's according. But then it's the whole next side to it too, right?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about it is that, I spent 5 of my years in Barataria working, and I could tell you, Naris is an institution, fellas. You can't talk Barataria without Naris. When you want to go online, you go Naris by the bar, you understand? Naris on the corner, there's no parking, there's no way to go. You could fall in the box drain right there. But Naris is the, Champions League. 2020 CPL, everything. You understand? Naris is it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So why you get the government of Micronesia to put in a bit the less?
Yeah, well, we could deal with that. You understand what I'm saying? We could deal with that.
So it's sounding like the end. It's sounding like the end of our era there for the lineman spot.
Yeah, so.
Yeah, boy, that one is a hard one.
So moving on now to something a little less, how to put it, of a jovial nature when it comes to linemen and so on. A comedy of errors. Right, we have this whole thing about the AV ruling and the costing Petrotrin $1 billion and so on and so on. I mean, when you really listen to the figure involved there. State-owned Petrotrin has been urged by Senior Counsel Deborah Peake to move quickly and file an application to the High Court to set aside the results of an arbitration between AV Oil and Gas and Petrotrin that could cost the state company close to $1 billion.
Really?
A Billy. Let's see. Wait.
This is madness, Dred. And the thing about it is that a lot of people would look at this, fellas, honestly, and think it's an isolated incident. I could say without a shadow of a doubt it's not an isolated incident. I fed up, go on different state entities, and once it is something reach mediation and arbitration, the state just get rinsed out. And the state does usually get rinsed out because different politics playing and things, Jed, and the state just don't put a proper legal team in place in order to defend the case. You understand? And that is exactly what goes on. If you read the details of the case itself, is that basically Petrotrin didn't show up. And I can't tell you how much cases I had to jump on in order during the arbitration part of the proceedings in order to defend the state, and you find like you're there on your own. You understand what I'm saying? And what arbitration is basically a step before the court, so that taxpayers don't have to pay all that money with trials and things now. And they basically assess all the situation objectively and say, fellas, this is what it is, and I bind it. You understand? So that position that come out with that AV thing, fellas, that binding. The only way the state could get away from paying that now is if they take it to a trial. And once they go to the court will basically look back and say, well, listen, they will go back to the arbitration and they will say, well, listen, is it that the arbitration was unfair? So there's a lot of cases where that arbitration will end up standing as is, and that is waiting. So to me, state institutions have to get a house in order, Dread, and start to take these arbitrations seriously, boy, and get proper legal support, and not just, and it is have a lot of friend thing in that too, especially if it's our friend. They go figure, well, here, what, you go put you ain't put no such a strong legal team just to kind of show that you go through the process, but then they end up winning the case on that kind of thing. And oh gosh, we got to stop that. It's taxpayers' money. You understand?
Well, and the thing about it is, Petrotrin, it exists just for things like this now. Petrotrin, the word itself, exists only to lose money in cases and such. Right. And speaking of that, we come to what our episode tonight is about, right? Many of you would have seen the ad that went around saying, why did we close Petrotrin? All right. I mean, it's been a while now. Some people want to know why we're talking about it now, but we will see now why we're talking about it, and we'll see how much people glean something from this episode. Bringing to our podcast tonight, we have Navin Baboolal. He is a process engineer with 14 years of experience in the oil and gas industry, and he worked at Petrotrin Point-a-Pierre Refinery for 11 years. Welcome, Navin.
All right, good night, everybody. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. And also, we have none other than Timothy Bailey, the president of the Steelworkers Union of Trinidad and Tobago. Timothy, how you doing, sir?
I'm good. Good night, guys. Thanks for inviting me to the chill setting.
Yeah.
Glad to be part of the show tonight.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're glad to have you. And the thing is, we promoted it as why did we close Petrotrin, but that question in and of itself is not to say only to do with Petrotrin. Why did we close Petrotrin? Why is Metal closed? What are we looking forward to, right? What does the future hold for all of those workers who have been laid off, ostracized from the industry, and so on, right? So as I would have said about Navin, you worked at Petrotrin for 11 years or so?
Yeah, it was for 11 years, from really straight out of UE up until the point of closure.
Right, straight out of UE.
So right up until that point.
And Timothy, we were working at ArcelorMittal?
Yeah, I worked there for 12 years. Obviously, half of the years I would have been on secondment to the union.
Definitely. We'll get into all that union business in a bit. So let's start off with the meat of the matter, as the ad would have suggested. Why did we close Petrotrin? So, Navin, if you could start us off. From your opinion, being there for 11 years, being part of that culture, being part of that entity, understanding the ins and outs, why was Petrotrin closed?
All right. Thanks for the loaded question, but okay. I feel like we can't talk about Petrotrin without trying to understand the history a little bit, right? So I mean, everybody knows Petrotrin there forever. The organization was around for like a little over 100 years, in various incarnations. And what it was like an amalgamation of a whole set of smaller oil production or even refining entities that over time kind of came together through the government, basically. So you would have maybe had like these private entities, like the examples would be like the Trinidad Leaseholds I would have heard about, or the U-boats or the Shells or whatever. They would have had maybe production assets or refinery assets or some combination thereof. And as they would have maybe closed down bit by bit, the government would have taken control of them, and eventually, over time, this became into the huge entity that we saw as being Petrotrin towards the end, right? Throughout that space of time, both sides of the asset, I would say the upstream and the downstream asset, would have had some upgrades going along to keep it running, to deal with maintenance issues, that kind of thing. And at the point of it becoming Petrotrin in 1993, it would be what is called a fully integrated oil company, right? That means you have what we like to call vertical integration in business, meaning that you're from the beginning of your source, in this case, your crude oil, going all the way down to refining and selling product was what the company was involved in, and all aspects in between. The reason we need to kind of think about the history is because Petrotrin is basically a group of legacy assets that come together, right? At the point of forming in 93, maybe like the newest asset in Petrotrin that we would be calling it Petrotrin would probably be already 20 years old. So you had to think about, okay, you have a asset here that owns both sides, upstream and downstream, and that maintenance will require upgrades. It will require maybe a higher cost than you would expect. It might have a cost than you expect for a modern or a new facility. So that's like one of the issues I think that would have feed into it, right? Now, by virtue of being old, it means you have to spend money to come into the new, to basically be useful in the current setting. So driven by market changes, the thing people don't realize with the oil industry is that it has changed all the time. Like mostly driven by environmental aspects, but also driven by efficiency or better data. An example I could use is this, transition towards cleaner fuels. When we were younger, we would have had lead in the in the gasoline. As time go by, we remove lead from gasoline, and that would have come at a cost to the company, right? They would have had to go towards making good fuel from purely what you had, rather than using lead as additive and moving along with your life. A next example could be in terms of price competition. So as people get more efficient, refineries become more efficient, they become more profitable, they might be able to push the market in a better way. Maybe I could, as a huge refiner or a huge producer, and I could try to undercut the market a little bit. This is exactly where you see with Saudi Arabia recently and Russia, where they're trying to have the price war. So that kind of thing it could be negative, but it could also force efficiency into an entity, right? Where either you compete, you upgrade and compete, or you give up. So that would have led Petrotrin as an entity now to have expenses that maybe a new refiner or a newer company, if you will, wouldn't necessarily have to deal with, right? Conversely, though, you had to remember that they didn't necessarily have to pay for the assets any way you would do it if you were starting from new, right? Where you got to go on and borrow however many $1 billion to get this thing started. You don't necessarily have to go down that road. Then, by virtue of being state-owned now, Petrotrin had a responsibility to this country. That is probably one of the questions I feel we will need to dive into as we go along. And what that's supposed to mean, Petrotrin one, and then what that's supposed to mean for state entities in general. Because we have a whole heap of them that supposedly just do different things to achieve the aims of our government overall, I guess, to improve our society. And, we probably would need to unpack a little bit what was the role of Petrotrin in this and how that could have affected the company from as opposed to maybe like an economic standpoint or economic gain standpoint. And then, what that could have do to the company in terms of its foreign exchange position or that kind of thing. As an offshoot of that now, maybe your labor costs and your operating costs in general could be higher for two reasons. One, you have that, basically you have that legacy issue that, okay, my equipment older, so it might be less efficient, but I still need to run it, that kind of thing. Or also, I inherit an organization that had systems, right? In the days this industry starts, basically, it had nothing, right? If you talk to some real older heads from the Gasparilla and Marbella area and thing, they could tell you about how, what is Tropical Plaza now used to be a high-low grocery, or even before that, it would be a shopping place to live in the refinery compound and that kind of jazz. So, the company itself, over time, and all its entities that predecessor entities that came together would result in the company being self-sufficient. And maybe that's not necessarily the most efficient model to run in the current day when contracted services or something like that might be the easiest thing to get. And I mean, I would definitely like to hear Timothy's views on this as we go along, because, it would have been a point of contention between the company and and the union, and then how they suppose deal with that in a modern era where maybe your competitors have a much lower operating cost than you or I expect. Within that, I want to say we probably need to ask the question of, is it fair to compare yourself to these kind of refiners either? Like, is it fair to compare an entity like Petrotrin, whose responsibilities, in my opinion, extended well beyond just profit and loss to the actual state of Trinidad and what it would have done for Trinidad as a company, to, another private entity who in the same business, I'll try to use a name that not.
So when you say that the state entity, let's go into that one time, right? The state entity owes something to the nation. What are we talking about here, and what are we talking about beyond profit and loss here?
All right. So in this is my opinion. Basically, I think a state entity should exist at the directive of the government, right? Meaning, I as a government decide, okay, I'm going to start a company, and I will use this company as a vehicle to achieve certain strategic objectives that I have for my country. Again, personal opinion, the role of the government should always be to improve the lives of its citizens, right? I don't view the government as a business. I don't think they should be in the efforts or, be trying to be running to make a profit, right? That's not their role. Their role is to improve our lives as the citizens of this country and to use our resources to the best of their ability to do that. Now, granted,
so we're talking about the workforce itself that would be involved in Petrotrin and the petroleum and bringing back subsidy and all that to the country and all of that we're talking about?
Exactly. Yeah, that's kind of where I'm going with it. So, I mean, different entities have different rules, right? But and granted, Petrotrin wasn't necessarily set up for that, but it kind of evolve into that over time, where we'll start with the gasoline subsidy or the fuel subsidy in general for this country. It would have had years where the fuel subsidy wasn't necessarily paid to the fullest to the company.
Right.
The government may have been in a tight position or whatever it is. I don't necessarily have details on it, but I mean, we know they would have had times when, okay, they can't pay the subsidy this month, you'll take it a couple of months down or whatever.
Right. Okay, continue.
And then I think an entity like that does have some degree of a responsibility to provide employment. Not necessarily to the point of being overstaffed, but at a point that is fair with regards to how your country does operate. We still live in a Trinidad where some people, not all, but some people still have permanent jobs, right? I would beg people to look a little further outside and look at countries where, government employees, public servants are contract employees. Teachers are contract employees. You just teach for 6 months and then they send you home and you come back. So, in terms of the economic standing of your country is not necessarily about welfare economics, as Irvin put, but about providing an environment where people could have sustainable long-term work. And overall, by their efforts, contribute to the economy, right? As an engineer, I believe in physics. The efforts you put forward should be that your energy converted into growth for your country. It's not about just doing it for the sake of it.
Right. I mean, one thing I would say though, Navin, is that while we, concerned with the physics, we also concerned with the economics of it as well. In that there's an equation of efficiency. You know what I mean? And I know what welfare economics Butch talking about it, but anyhow, we could deal with that. You understand? But Timothy, in this context, in my understanding, I mean, what I find is unfair that is happening is that people are comparing the Petrotrin and that level of efficiency to, like, let's say a BP. If you compare it to a BP or a Repsol and that kind of thing, then yes, you will start to make those sort of comparisons. But to me, forget welfare state or anything. At the end of the day, these institutions, these state agencies are providing a function, just as ArcelorMittal, just as Methanex, all of these different entities in Point Lisa's estates. Wouldn't you say the government has a responsibility to keep these organizations going and have them running as efficiently as possible in order to continue serving the country?
Definitely. I'm looking at some of the comments and it's
Yeah, that thing I like.
it's very interesting. It's very interesting. And it's nothing that I didn't expect.
Yeah.
Because let's be realistic. The government did a very good job of working on the population to perpetuate its position as it relates to Petrotrin. And the reality is, if we're being straightforward and frank, Petrotrin was closed, and this is facts. This is what was said by the government as a result of not being able to pay a bullet payment, and the government taking the position not of giving Petrotrin 850 million US dollars to make the bullet payment, but acting as a guarantor, and people mixing up the two.
Right.
The reality is the government took 400 million US dollars to pay
That's
off
right.
workers to go up the road. Listen to this. To go up the road and still try to fight up to run an entity that is nowhere employing the numbers that Petrotrin would have employed, impact the society, the community, and Trinidad and Tobago as a whole. All what is being perpetuated in the media, we cannot get away from the fact what was the information that was shared by the government, and the fact is that the Petrotrin had a $850 million bullet payment to make, and at the time the government did not want to act as a guarantor. And some of the things that being said in the chat, that is being messaged in the chat, is the reason.
Right.
The reason is that they had issues with the trade union and the workers' salary, and and they wanted to get rid of that. Now let's go back. Let's track back. The discussion initially was that we was restructuring Petrotrin. Petrotrin wasn't restructured. Petrotrin was closed, and half of the bullet payment that was put to close Petrotrin could have been used, and it didn't have any need to be used, because the reality is that you were being asked to act as a guarantor, not to pay the loan. Petrotrin was operating, and Navin could support me. My information is that in the last year of Petrotrin operation, they turned a profit. Not so, Navin?
To be honest, I really didn't follow up on what the last financial statement would be, but I'll look at the comments, and I think it was.
It did. I remember reading that in the paper that time, like Petrotrin has done a profit randomly, and I was like, and that was around the same time I was hearing the whole saga about it, looking the union and the going back and forth about closing and all that. It was very strange.
Yeah, but fellas, we had to take that with a pinch of salt. Let me hear it.
So what I would like to say is, I see Rajiv comment, and I take it Petrotrin didn't make a profit, right? I'll just accept that for what it is. But what I will say is this: I know that the company would have prioritized paying its external debt before it paid certain things. Again, Petrotrin is a very dynamic entity. It had many pressures acting on it. It wasn't as simple as saying, hey, I just want to do this, we want to do it kind of vibes. You had pressure from the government, you would have had pressure from the union, you'd have pressure from the people who work in there. You know, and he made a statement about the refinery itself, right? Now, nobody split that refinery, because by virtue of being fully integrated, you do two things. One is you take yourself out of the capital gains business that an E&P company is. So let me say, for example, right? I don't want to talk out of turn about heritage, but let me say, for example, we have a outright collapse in oil prices tomorrow. Outright collapse to the point where the oil selling for a price that below their cost of production. And we know that could happen. COVID show us it could happen, right? They get lucky that it was making, I shouldn't say get lucky. They're selling small cargoes, so they have time to do what they stop selling, they build up an inventory and wait for price to appreciate again, because COVID was one of them one-off sort of incidents, right? If we have a prolonged, extremely long depression and oil prices drop back to a point that below their cost of production, right? They effectively are at the mercy of the markets, and they will go back into that red scenario. Now, what having a refinery in your mixes do is allow you to say, okay, I insulate myself a little bit away from this up and down pricing thing, because I move from a model where I dependent entirely on the price in the market, and I mean to some extent my own efficiencies, but on what the market is give me, to a point now where, okay, I'm working on margins. So technically I'm buying the oil, albeit from myself, but I'm producing it at a cost, I'm refining it at a cost, and I'm selling the slater products at a cost as well. So, the difference there is kind of how you will make your profit. In theory, I've heard many different sides of this, and I don't know what the truth is, to be honest, that E&P on its own was profitable in its own, just standing there by itself. And if they were to sell the oil outside, potentially make a profit. That's what they're saying now. But none of us here know exactly what's the taxation scheme for Heritage. We don't know, what the actual operating cost is. We don't know what kind of holidays they may have. And we have no idea what the debt loading is. And also, if that debt loading could have been refinanced to something that was much more acceptable to the company overall. We could have split it and see.
Go ahead,
Cutter.
Now you go ahead.
Yeah, well, you see what we're saying, and Timothy, we wanted to come back in here because my understanding of the history is that, listen, this institution functioning for over 100 years, and that what Petrotrin would have done in 1993 is that you would have had an amalgamation of a series of companies where you would have the unions from those different companies that would have come together, and you had this now larger entity that was Petrotrin, where there's a certain need that has to be satisfied. The push from the government, and the government always like to come with, and of course this is not, as he even say, politics. This is not politics. No matter who was in government would have to still take a decision, right? And at the end of the day, you had to be able to look at it from a perspective of, will the government guarantee it or not? And later on, we go in and come to start to look at the credit ratings of different state agencies, and you will see how positive Petrotrin, our positive position Petrotrin actually was in order to raise that financing. What is the difference between the structure Petrotrin is in now, Timothy, compared to the Petrotrin before? Because they keep making it look as if, they close on Petrotrin is a completely new Petrotrin. But to me, it looks like it was just an excuse to let go of these 2,600 people in order to try and jimmy the numbers to make it look like they're profitable now. But when I look at the financial statements, it's looking similar to what it was before. It's just that the assets and operating and maintenance just assigned to one company alone, which is who running the refinery.
Definitely, and what you have done there is answer the question there. You have answered the question. The Petrotrin, there's no doubt that Petrotrin needed a restructuring, not closure. Needed a restructuring. Right. The part that wasn't working, they needed to fix it and come again. Instead, what they did, and let's be straightforward and frank, they wanted to get rid of OWTU. They felt OWTU was too much of a force. They wanted to be in a position where they could give their friends and their family contractors. Let me be straightforward and frank. Contractors, contracts to oversee manpower contracts, as is happening now in Heritage. Pay them the same amount, because let me put something in perspective. We did a survey. When, for instance, and I'm giving you a ballpark figure, if a worker compensation package was $175 under Petrotrin with the trade union there. What they're doing now, they're paying the contractor $175 still and paying the worker $70. So what's the difference? What is the difference? Do the research.
Well, let me ask that. Is it as simple as they just remove the state employees and now just giving contracts to basically do the same thing, but now at a higher price?
What we have now, if we had 1,000 workers now, we operate them with 400 workers, they're working longer hours for less money.
But then let me ask this. But then let me ask this, Timothy.
No benefits.
Right, but then let me ask this, Timothy. People always say once you're working Petrotrin, you're getting best pay. Is it that Petrotrin, compared to other oil and gas companies, was really one of the best paid? Navin.
And the reality is that is not so. But that was what was peddled to the public. What they did was they gave a comparison of somebody in the oil and gas industry, somebody working in Petrotrin, and compare them to a public servant, and you cannot do that. You can't do that. So a normal public servant, somebody who's making $3,500, making $4,000, watching an engineer salary and saying, hey, exactly what you're seeing in this chat as comments is exactly what they perpetuated to the public, and it worked. It worked.
Mhm.
And we're
So
now
people
waking up
taking
and
up
seeing
then.
that the bartering system was damaged. We're seeing the effects of the closure of Petrotrin right now. We are seeing it. When you had that huge spread, as it relates to nearly 7,000 workers employed in an entity, and they coming out, whether it is weekly, fortnightly, monthly, and they're spending, they're reinvesting into the economy. And then on top of that, there's a misconception that Petrotrin wasn't paying. Petrotrin paid over $21 billion from 2014 to 2017 to this country. That has never been discussed. But the narrative, because who holds the mic? Who is in charge of the key media entities? Who has power to control what is the narrative in these industries? Who? That's a question we must ask ourselves. And that's
Now-
what was done. A job was done on us.
So to answer your
Navin.
question, let's see. The numbers that they put out was absolute rubbish. It was, they went and the most politicized numbers there were basically doing simple division of, I have X amount of employees, not my salary bill, and get it clear. It have salaries and it have benefits. It have a difference, right? My entire compensation bill or whatever they wanted to, that salaries, wages, benefits, all those things together, work up to a certain amount by doing a simple division, right? That's not the case. You have a range of employees. You have some people, you have a range, right? As an organization, you have a whole set of people doing different things. I don't think that people in Petrotrin were earning like a huge amount more than anybody else. I know for a fact in my position that people in technical roles probably was not earning as much as they could have earned on the outside. You may have had some degree of a benefits package to help, but again, people need to understand the same thing I keep talking about. Everybody just want to talk profit and loss numbers and not necessarily think about the implications overall, right? Petrotrin closed with roughly 5,000 people. It had about 10,000 people dependent on it directly. I'm not talking contractors, I'm not talking the community. I'm talking about people who retired, people who had children who was using the medical, people who wife or husband, as the case may be, dependent was using ununion medical. So when you think about all those things, right, they put out numbers there. Anything Petrotrin was spending on in that sense, any dependent who would have been using medical benefits or insurance benefits or that kind of thing, that moved to the state. And it moved to this from an entity that's not producing. So basically, it had a chance. Maybe Petrotrin was running to a net loss, but it had expenses that were being paid first, right? And we're still not clear where the annual loss was existing in that company. Nobody ever do a real deep economic analysis to understand that. What if it turned out that the loss that company was experiencing was the gasoline subsidy? Then what? The population unhappy about it? Do we how you want to assimilate that? Because not every expense, but a lot of the expenses that the company would have incurred for what we want to call welfare or for helping for employees or whatever it is, right? It now sits with the national healthcare system. Can the national healthcare system deal with it? Think about people who, let me say, somebody 70 years, right? They started working Petrotrin in the late 70s, early 80s. In a time when HSE wasn't where it is now. So mankind would be walking around without hard hat, without PPE, maybe taking in smells in a time when we were not thinking about safety the way we just think about it now. Maybe they pick up something over time. They now don't have no recourse. If you work Petrotrin all your life and you retire, which insurance company going to give you insurance for a terminal disease? That's not going to happen. You are entirely dependent on the national healthcare system, which itself overloaded and do have the resources.
Now, I want to jump in and add something to what you're saying there, and you touched on it. The issue of Petrotrin, the real issue began in 2007 with the WGTL project. Let's be straightforward and frank.
Well, let me deal with that.
$2.6 billion TT, $400 million US dollars was wasted on that project. And the bullet payment we're talking about arise out of that project. So Petrotrin was closed as a consequence. A poor management decision. Obviously, they love to make the trade union and the workers the scapegoat. Poor management decision to do that WGTL project, which cost taxpayers $400 million US, and was as a result ended up with us not being able as a government to guarantee the $850 million bullet payment that was supposed to be paid, which is the reason they stated that Petrotrin was closed. People don't talk about this, and to add insult to injury, $35 million US, that $400 million US investment was sold for $35 million US to some random person. What we know as Nikon.
Well, it went to Nikon. Let me be real. It went to Nikon. Nikon came and bought it after, right?
For $35 million US.
$35 million and profitable. But we go get to Nikon just now. So let me deal with these two projects, fellas.
Okay.
This one
So,
on the ultra-low sulfur diesel
yeah,
project.
right. So I'm gonna need to disagree with Timo, but it's just, I mean, it's because it's easily confused projects. The bullet payment really was for the ULSD plant. The GTL plant was actually something separate.
Right.
The ULSD plant, while I wasn't involved, so I can't talk directly about what happened. But I'll say from being on the outside, it had a point there where that was actually, to be completely honest, one of the few very well-run projects we had at the beginning. It went well for a good while.
Samsung.
This was a Samsung project, yeah. It went well. It accelerated pretty well at the beginning, and then within it started to fall off the rails later on, like towards the middle of the project. The thing to remember with project financing, right, is that okay, when you borrow money for a project, you expect to complete the work in a certain amount of time. I mean, you're gonna know this, right? In 2-3 years time, you expect for design, engineering, construction, and commissioning to be done, and you off to the races from there. It had reached a point with Petrotrin. Yeah.
What I want to say to you though, if I have to make a bullet payment of $850 million and I lose $400 million on another project, indirectly, that money gone.
So we build into the same point though, which is across the next remaining 10-15 years of your loan, you're supposed to be making money to make your payments, right? Now, to be completely honest, when you think about the history of this country, $850 million US, where you gonna get at like this, right? It would probably be a badly designed loan to begin with. I mean, it's an oil company, it's a state-run oil company. You're custom running not necessarily highest profits in the world, but making something, right? In that case, your aim should be really and truly to mortgage out your debt as long as you could and keep your cash flow going. I mean, the company closed because it ran out of cash, right? Ultimately, that's what happened. And as Timo said, the government refused to guarantee loans to keep it going in the entity that it was. So,
right. But let me deal with that a little bit, though, Navin. Just to bring, because there are many dimensions to this discussion, fellas, and let me deal with the one with the government guarantee, because I would have been right, because I dealt with that where we successfully dealt with a public-private partnership, but in the housing sector, right? And that issue of guarantee and government guarantee came up. Let me give a little background. Tech, so TGU is actually went out with a bond as well. Let me see. TGU's bond, I forget the size of the bond, but it's over $1 billion, right? And what Moody's ended up saying is that because they indirectly affiliated with Tech is something they will amount to, it will amount to essentially being a government guarantee. Now, the problem is that over the past 8 years or so, there has been a resistance to move towards any more government guaranteeing of debt. But when you look at the state entities across the board, Petrotrin, Tech, WASA, TSTT, when you look at the other state entities, by the government's involvement with the organization, indirectly, you essentially had these credit agencies looking at them as well, these kind of indirectly government guarantee. So by them saying, Timo, and I'll come to you on this one, by them saying that they don't want a government guarantee, honestly, fellas, I'm not of the opinion that Petrotrin really closed. The refinery is closed, but it was the restructured into 3 different companies, and Heritage now is the company that holding this debt. How are you sure that guarantee didn't still happen, but in another form. Because when it is you have a company like Samsung coming in to do a project, 700 and let me get the actual number.
850.
791 million.
850 million US.
Right? 850 million. No organization, no international organization of that size will go into an unsecured loan like that, right? For any E&P project. It will have to have some sort of backstop. You understand? So that 850 million payment would have, at some point in time, these people would have said, listen, we will put up the money, we will build the ultra-low sulfur diesel plant, but all you have to pay we back with this bullet payment. If all you pay, it will have some sort of backstop where they could go for that money for, right? In a situation like that, the government just can't say, hey, we're closing Petrotrin and we don't have that liability anymore. That liability will still be there. You understand? So the term of not doing a government guarantee, to me, it was a big marketing thing that happened, and they come under different names, but those liabilities are still there. And what they attempt to do, well, let me deal with this ultra low before we go to World GTL and Nico and thing. Timo, what are you saying more that?
No, well, I share the same point of view of Navin. Navin hit the nail on the head as it relates to that.
Yeah.
But hearing what you're saying, and I kind of want to agree with what you're saying,
right,
but a little indecisive. A little indecisive. Who owns Heritage?
The government.
The government owns Heritage?
Mm-hmm. By a board.
Okay.
The board is appointed by government.
You sure about that?
Well, if that's not the case,
he built towards the citizens of Trinidad own Heritage. And the board appointed by the government to do corporate governance. And everybody feeling that role.
Exactly. And what we have experienced over the years, whether it's the WGTL, whether it's what's going on now, whether it's what's going on 10 years down the road, is that we have over and over put the wrong people to run, or I want to call it life support. Petrotrin was a life support. When you look at how the overarching responsibility Petrotrin had, when we have a cricket team and they're doing well, Petrotrin is the sponsor. Football team. So sports, culture, everything we did in this country, Petrotrin played a role in it. And people, and somebody was making, I think it's Navin was making a point that Petrotrin should have never been looked at from the point of view of only loss and profit. Cannot the role that Petrotrin played in terms of supporting society, the population, and the government. The mere fact that the taxes, the mere fact that what NIS lost $360 million from the closure of Petrotrin from 2018 to now, and the discussion right now is people getting old too fast. That's the discussion we're having now. Would we have been having a discussion if we had $360 million circulating in NIS right now? Would we have having that discussion? And these are the things. It cannot be looked at in isolation, because there is a trickle effect. Other things are connected. Just like Petrotrin, the operation of Petrotrin would have supported, TNTech would have got a revenue from the operation of Petrotrin. Fully. WASA. All those things would have been reduced now. When you cut up Petrotrin the way you cut up Petrotrin, and running Petrotrin in the way you're running Petrotrin. So what happened is that Petrotrin was looked at in isolation, and the reality is that that was wrong to look at Petrotrin in isolation. When you consider all the good that Petrotrin has done and would have done, and how it would have impacted our economy over the years, yes, restructuring was required, but what they did, no way. No way. Where are the numbers in terms of employment? Where are them? Where has it gone?
Now, I is the only man in the room right now. Well, Taurean is here, people. I know people saying, where Taurean, bring back Linton. Linton is here. right? But he's in the shadows. He's been shadow banned. As you can see, he's been shadow banned.
Shadows.
Right? You know,
He's managing the
he
party in the comments. It
I
have plenty
listening to the
mark here.
comments.
I
I
listening
listening to
to
the comments.
That to get hold on.
I
We
wish
have
I had
zapped him.
$850 in my pocket right now.
No, I am the only person. Now I have Taurean here as well. Well, I have no background in industry. I have no background in engineering. But I do live in Gasparilla, so I see the fire every night when it used to be blazing in the sky.
Used to see the fire.
Used to see the, well, I say used to see the fire, right? And it hurt me when I know I would not see the fire again because the fire become part of my life, you know what I mean? But you know, I come from a community where the culture of the entity is tied it's so intrinsically tied to the history.
Right.
All right. And
That's
to
right.
places in South where people, you know, where our grandparents and so on learn certain skills, not even to say oil skills alone, but because of what was going on in the estate of Concord and so on. Right. And what happened over time. And, you know, they hear what Texaco and Trinidad and all of this kind of thing. And, you know, again, being outside, you know, when I heard that Petrotrin was being closed, I just like, you know, I hold my head, you know, and I just was like, I went on a rant on Facebook and so on, because it's like, why is it, right? And whoever wants to jump on it, and I mean, it's what we're talking about for the past hour almost, but again, why is it that something so intrinsic, right? And as people are saying, it's supposed to make a profit because at the end of the day, it is there to do a function and so on. It is supposed to be, you know, feasible to run. Why is it that things always have to reach to this point with the management of these kind of industries and so on in Trinidad? Why is it that there could not have been a restructuring and people will still be laid off, but you won't have this mass exodus of workers in the sense that it was that they just stopped the company, right? Why is it that that it has to come to this point? What role did the union have to? Okay, let me get into this, right? Timothy, is there anything the union could have done differently, you think, over the history of Petrotrin that could have led to something better for the company? Did they in any way keep back the company or anything like that? And I'm not saying that, you know.
Well, that's all based on opinion. I think that at the end of the day, if you look especially at the arguments that were put forward by the union, some of the investments the flopped investments, the union have on record where they have on more than one occasion would have said, hey, that is not a good move, because the union would have basically be on the ground. They would not have been handpicked people running a company, but people on the ground and know what's going on. I am aware as well of instances where the union would have said, here we're going on, let's take the money and invest it in what Navin was talking about, the infrastructure. The reality is that it is easier, and that has always been the mantra of governments, to blame workers and to blame unions. That's the easiest thing to do. But the reality is that when a government is put in a position of governance, their responsibility is to put people in place, which is the board, to run these entities, corporate soul, which was Petrotrin, and run it efficiently. So when Petrotrin flops, how could it be then that it's the union? What did the board of Petrotrin do to ensure that Petrotrin, over the period of time, whether it's over a decade or 2 decades, did not end up in the situation that it ended up in? And that is the question that must be had. The reality is that over and over, and I don't want to play the political game, the governments of this country, whether it's PNM, UNC, whoever, they have failed as it relates to putting the right people to govern and to manage our business. That's the reality, you know. The board is put in a position to make strategic decisions, and decisions that would benefit the company, medium, short, medium, and long term. The reality is that if that had happened, Petrotrin wouldn't be closed today. We would not have wasted $400 million on a WBCS plan.
Was Petrotrin in a position, given the union's efforts, right, and the pushback from the union, were they ever in a position to say that they could lay off people? in a way that would be feasible, seeing that people would have said that. Yeah, Navin.
Let me jump in a bit. Two things. One, I mostly agree with Timothy, but if we now train to think that this whole union and management are becoming a zero-sum game, right? I will go so far as to dive a little bit and say there's a legacy of our colonial past, but it's a whole different discussion for next time. The short answer in my mind, though, is that, okay, as an employee in the middle of it, let me say we had a union on this side and management of the company on this side, if you assume that the union was getting out of hand, for argument's sake, right? If that is what was going on, they could have only done that if management was weaker, and vice versa, right? So you have that going on in the middle there. I was a union member. 90% of that, in my mind, was an insurance policy in case something go wrong for me. I somebody don't like me, something happened, that kind of jazz, right? And when you're thinking about it from like that way, right? Thinking about it from like that perspective of being the employee in the middle, you have this battle that seems external to you. Honestly, sometimes it seems external to you, but you just there, right? You have some people who blindly believe both sides of it, and that, to me, that really shouldn't have been. Like, if you want to say what was the failure of Petrotrin, is all parties feeling the responsibility. That's my personal opinion. Everybody. I will even say me too, right? It had times I probably could have been a better employee. It have some people in the chat might disagree for themselves, but we all know it, right? The management feel in terms of maybe how they choose to spend money, where they choose to put the priorities, what they choose to be important issues as opposed to what wasn't.
Because then you have the typical thing too. I mean, is a reality, as you know. It mightn't be you might seem small now, but everybody knows a link work kind of thing there inside there too. You know what I mean? And that in itself, that all of that plays into the public perception of the company as well. You know what I mean? As much as that might be maybe a big factor to the numbers, it still shows you, where our, as you say, we could go into a whole discussion of post-colonial mentality and all of that, right? But this is what happens with every state-run enterprise. You know what I mean? There's always and every state-run enterprise seems to be doomed to failure. You know what I mean? I don't know.
So let me jump in there. I think all you need to also be fair to yourselves, fair to the companies when you define failure. And I noticed a lot of comments in that coming up talking about profit, and they didn't turn profit, so therefore they fail. And this, listen, you need to be careful how you just jump at something and say, well, hey, you're not profitable for this period, therefore it's for a specific period you're talking about. Because when it is oil price had dropped to below what a KFC bucket was, you could have buy a KFC bucket, for more than oil price. No company was profitable for that period. You understand? So it's a matter of putting in perspective how you define failure. And I want to make a point here before I come to, because Cutter, you talk about the fire in the refinery in Gasparilla.
In the sky, the fire in the sky.
But I hear it had a fire recently. I hear it had an explosion.
An explosion, and it wake me up. It wake me up.
Like one explode something down there.
I thought something fall on my roof.
So people had to watch how that mafia does run to that basically in the midst of all of this, Nikon get away with a World GTL project, which is a massive asset, and was able to purchase that for just $35 million. That is the capital expenditure they had to put. And they are running as a shell company to produce paraffin and a series of downstream products. And they are saying, well, they're profitable. Well, if you get the assets for $35 million, you must be profitable. You understand what I'm saying? Because you had almost little or nothing to put in order to get it, to get the plan going. But I also want to put in perspective how we look at profitability. And I want to bring back the same 4 state entities: Petrotrin, TNTech, WASA, and TSTT. All right? Because it's a state organization. You can't take a state organization like Petrotrin, say, well, you don't have financials of BP, so therefore you fail, right? You need to compare it like with like as well. You understand? So if you look at other state agencies, look at the credit ratings. And credit ratings is something where Moody's, Standard and Poor's, all of these people would have taken all of what we're discussing here into account to define whether the company is failing or not. Failing meaning, do you have a stable outlook? Is it that you plan to recover? How you plan to recover? Because your situation would have looked, even when they signed that deal with the ultra low sulfur diesel plant, Petrotrin's financial numbers would have been looking horrible at that point in time. But is the future revenue that they were due to gain at a certain point in time that would have then stabilized that? And the Standard and Poor's people took that into account in September 2018. Right, I'm bringing facts because I've seen a lot of people talking things inside of there and it's not facts. Let me bring the facts. Petrotrin got a B1 rating, right? B1 rating is with a stable outlook. You understand what I'm saying? Tech got a triple B minus in July 2020, right? The government's outlook, right? The government who everybody running down to get government guarantees for and whatnot, get a BA1 stable, which is just above that B1. You understand what I'm saying? Since Petrotrin restructured, right, and they end up putting the asset, you see the smart in how they do it, fellas. They put the asset in this one company. What's the name of the company? Navin, the one that has the refinery.
No, that's Guaracara Refining. Guaracara Refining. That's GRC.
So what they did is they isolated that. So by isolating that now, the credit rating for because you're just calling it on a different name. So Heritage now has a credit rating of BA3, which is much stronger than the B1. So they were able to raise financing and restructure this now in order to refinance whatever outstanding payments they had and that kind of thing. But let me ask you this. If the oil price dropped to $1 tomorrow, you don't think they will drop back into that loss position immediately? Let me be sensible with how we are approaching this thing. Tech signed a power purchase agreement with TGU. TGU's bond was oversubscribed. You understand? Everybody rushed TGU because Tech signing this PPA with them gave them an indirect government guarantee. I ain't telling all of this, or they could go on Standard & Poor's and Moody's and read the same thing. So why is the government giving these indirect government guarantees to these organizations to raise this massive amount of money? And they did it through NIF. Remember NIF? So National Investment Fund Holding Company that stores all of the government assets. I'm telling all you because there was many attempts to do that and that's what all state agencies do. State agencies, when they get in this financial trouble, a lot of the financing agencies like Republic Bank, Answer Merchant Bank, all of them just line up because they just look at the risk and be like, we want to get first cut in that. And you would notice that Credit Suisse would have financed a lot of Petrotrin stuff in the earlies, and they would have attempted to come into the mix again now. But you have to look at that credit rating to get an understanding as to how stable they are. You know, TSTT get a B2 rating, stable outlook. You understand what I'm saying? And they were able to go on a roadshow and raise US $400 million based on a debenture that due in 2029. So when that bullet payment due in 2029, you don't think their financing numbers going to look a lot worse? You understand? So understand, people, that this is a very complex financial scenario, and you don't want to get lost in the maze of financiers positioning themselves in order to make money from a situation. Because if let me give you a background, another state entity has close to $15 billion worth of assets. It's nothing more complicated than a mortgage, you know. When you looking to go and get these bonds and debentures and that kind of thing. And at the end of the day, when you have these organizations with massive asset bases like that, that is attractive for financing institutions. So at the end of the day, what it is that they positioning themselves to get the best deal possible. And for people to say that Petrotrin was in a horrible situation, the credit ratings didn't show that. That's what I would say.
Yeah.
The vacancy report didn't reflect that either.
That's right. That's right. See the chat get quiet now. Come, let me be faster, man. Let me talk to chat.
So I will raise this point a little bit earlier, and we have like, I shouldn't say generic, but we have these supposed high level numbers about Petrotrin. All we have is our final number, and it read, and that was it. But we didn't. I don't think the government. I'm speaking of maybe out there, but I don't think the government or the powers that be may have gone to the depth of understanding exactly where this was coming from. Right? You have a net loss that they report, and you finally had that change, right?
No, but Navin, here's where I'll disagree with you there. Right after they talk about that Petrotrin closing and that kind of thing, NIF would have cropped up. You understand what I say?
Yeah.
And they did this magic bond arrangement with TGU. They did it with several other things, and the bonds were oversubscribed. So to me, what it is they refuse a government guarantee on one end because they had plans to set up something else elsewhere.
Fair enough. Yeah. So if we go down that road, though, I don't understand as well what would have been the motivation for this shutting down the refinery and shutting it down the way they did.
And I could tell you there was none.
Yeah, because I could say unequivocally, and I know it have nobody could challenge me in this chat on this. There is a configuration that's profitable. No matter what we saw outside there, there is a configuration that refinery that's profitable, and it is not necessarily just what you see on the surface. It might take shutting down certain portions for a while until you come back into a level of profitability that would allow for it to happen. It might take being a little bit more dynamic about the markets and understanding where you're selling and how you're selling, as opposed to just these bland top level numbers.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it have a configuration that's profitable. And by going out and impairing the way the asset looks to the public, I mean, you think about it. For all the discussion was started at this thing is an absolute waste. I don't even know why we still have this thing. Get it. Because you had a political agenda to fulfill with closing it down and getting the employees out, right? 3 months later, 3 people come back and say, yeah, we could think about it. One of which is the OWTU.
Right.
So, I mean, come on, think about it objectively. You make that asset look so bad to international investors. If that's what it was truly seeking, as a lot of people seem to say that, okay, somebody private could run it better and do it, or, or something along those lines, right? We make the asset look so impaired that we put ourselves out to the market. And make no mistake about it, is iron and steel. And the longer it sits there, the harder it's going to be to restart, to the point where it may never restart again.
That's right, and I want to touch on something here even more. And probably Timothy, you could come in here. Let me say, because people taking out of the equation that natural gas production has been dropping over the past 8 to 10 years. Oil price has been dropping worldwide over the past 8 to 10 years. So, to expect Petrotrin to be this one magic unicorn to be able to withstand against that, to me, is not realistic. However, if oil price was to jump to $200 a barrel tomorrow, Timothy, for the next 2 years, talk to Mehdi. What is the difference? What was the situation?
If it jumped to $200 a barrel, we are no refinery.
Exactly. You understand what I'm saying? And that is.
And we don't even have to go that far, bro. We could just look at the situation up the road, right, by Guyana. The easiest thing, we know it's about a relationship problem as well, but one of the easiest thing would have been for us to be refining those fines down the road, innit?
No, but hold on. Let me get a piece of the mafia here, Timothy. Let me get a piece of the mafia. What if I was to tell you one of the tranches of debts that Petrotrin had to finance over the past 15 years, that same financier over the past 5 years actually just building a U.S. hotel in Guyana and has plans to get a refinery going on? What would you say if I tell you that? Dino facts, I just gave mafia talk. And
just kidding.
Just kidding. You understand what I'm saying? I meet with men, I know. You understand what I'm saying? So at the end of the day, what you notice, Timothy, is now because we take this drastic position with Petrotrin, we lost our competitive advantage in the Caribbean. You understand? And Guyana now has an opportunity because it's real money flowing in Guyana. And Guyana now has an opportunity to now create a refining industry. We don't know if they actually will be. will do that. But they're definitely in a position now where the race before was we would have been like Bolt ahead of the curve. Right now we starting at the same line with them. You understand what I'm saying? Talk now. You understand?
Or I mean, more so, we could be working together with them. We could be refining
True.
Gani.
We could have been less combative and we could have been
Well,
working with
let's
them.
see some man whenever he talking about the other Caribbean nations. I think he's getting to this kind of football kind of banana. It's always a kind of cut like it's licks on the chest or some kind of thing. I don't know.
Yeah.
No, but I think something that as the normal layman should take into consideration, right? All subsidies gone, all. The same Petrotrin that was this quote unquote running at a loss would have been absorbing them subsidies for years to the comfort of the normal man on the ground. Now it have no subsidies, and have we seen any huge profit margin and the subsidies removed?
No, but Timothy, but hear this, Wassa still getting the subsidy, triple subsidy from Tiantec. Tiantec still getting the subsidy because the natural gas that's selling from NGC to Tiantec and Wassa to run all Wassa water treatment plants and whatnot is at a subsidy. The production
Wassa actually owes NGC $1.5 billion.
And I will never advocate. That's and why I say it is that if you could find a way to try and restructure these companies because there's state organization, people can't tell me about Petrotrin. I grew on bread and Point, You understand? Point is Trinidad. You understand? What you going to do with all big steel tank and pipe that there? This existed for 100 years. You telling me you just going and come and up some figure that? No, and I'm telling you
sad about it.
That had, and I'm telling all here, that had very little to do with any one individual. It's certain financing mafia running in the background that called the shot. And whoever was in government, that shot would have called. You understand? But what I'm saying is that as people, we more educated than that. We can't be taking that just so.
And I want to agree with you. I want to agree with you totally, brother. And I want to cut in and say at this point, the ordinary man, as an ordinary man, use an ordinary man. These are financiers. The ordinary man on the ground need to pay attention and recognize that what we once called essential industries are one by one disappear. They go in. And what we consider, I just call it life support. That is a life support of your government. The Wassas, the Tiantecs, the Petrotrin, even the steel industry. These things are being taken and put in the private hands of who? That's the objective of the report.
That's right.
Put in the hands of who?
So I see, Cutter, we had the question coming forward now was next for Trinidad and Tobago, right?
Yes.
And to be completely honest, we don't know. And it's not a Petrotrin question alone, right? We leave Petrotrin now. We go into how Trinidad is run. And I think maybe in the future it'd be good to have our economists on to really discuss how this country is run, because we have one perception of what it is, and then what it truly is different, right?
Yeah, but them like to come conservative as well, and they like to step back in the crease. So if they're coming, let them come with a nice shot.
But we know this country is financed by the oil and gas sector. We know that is what it is. That's where it's come from. That's where our money has come from. Right now, we're seeing a reduction in where it's coming, and how much then. And we have no alternatives that seem to be coming up. So I see a example of renewable energy here, right? Remember, we are island states. Unless we have something to export, we are island state tied to the US dollar. Unless we have something to export and gain that foreign exchange, it's not going to help because we're not making anything here. Our manufacturing reach a point that almost non-existent. Maybe have 2 or 3 true manufacturers in Trinidad again. We have the food processing people too, right? But more than anything else, our economy financed by energy, and that's why we just see these huge crashes socially when oil price or gas price drop. We're looking at an environment where oil and gas going to be reducing with time, right? Gas price, shale gas pretty much destroy LNG prices in this particular region. But make no mistake about it, that gas that produced from BP and Shell and going through Atlantic is what does keep this country. So
Correct.
Petrotrin to some extent was there to provide cash flow and to provide a softer landing for when things happen in terms of, the same thing we ask, we're going to go to our floating gasoline price now. Our salaries don't float with gasoline price. Granted, we had a subsidized price, and fair or unfair, and whatever market efficiencies or economic inefficiencies that costed is a different discussion. Well, it's partly discussion, but it's something we'll need to discuss in more depth, right? But a fixed gasoline price does also cause you to sometimes pay a premium, sometimes you pay below. In my case, I pay in a premium forever because I have to use premium gasoline in my car. So I well above the floating gasoline price right now, and I pay in that for years compared to someone else who may be using diesel and would have been below. So when this starts to move now, and again, we're buying and selling, with closing the refinery, we move away from our manufacturing economy again, right? So we become traders as opposed to manufacturers. And what that's going to mean for us again is that we will be at the mercy of prices. So we keep talking about if oil price fall and heritage becomes, cash negative or whatever it's the case. What if we go the other way and oil prices start to climb? And we start to see fuel prices that start to run away because, again, we're importing and we're not importing a volume that, is enough for us to influence how much we get to be paid for. I mean, we will buy cargoes, but I don't think we buy into a volume that could say, yeah, well, we're going to dictate a price to somebody who's selling it to us. So we put in ourselves piece by piece into a state where we're not going to be able to afford our own lifestyles if things get truly bad. And from my perspective, I don't feel like we're seeing where the innovation could come from now for where we have other things to export, where we have another, some sort of a financial enterprise or entity that will help us to get out of this. And a lot of people mistake the service industry in Trinidad and think that, okay, the service industry is something that making money now. You just calculate GDP based on how much money people spend to get things, right? That's all well and good. But unless we export in them services or unless we start making things on our own, we're going to be in a bad position in 20, 25 years.
I see that statement that oil and gas is not.
No, we could deal with that. Yeah.
What?
Pull it up, Victoria. Pull it up.
Hold up. Let me just deal with us on the thing here, right? At the bottom of the screen, we have a question from Andrew Gobadan. It says, what was the barriers to the restructuring? And I think overall, what we are asking over and over, why? And I think we really have to turn our eye on everyone, as Navin would say, everybody has a part to play. And really and truly, it has to do a lot with culture, but somebody else take it away from me.
Let me take this one. It is a one-word answer, Andre, and it's trust. Employees didn't trust management, and by virtue of that, they would have leaned towards a union. And for good or bad, we didn't get into the discussion on what a union there for, right? But
we will that next time.
Yeah, we need to have probably a longer discussion there. But the profound lack of trust in, okay, if they make these cuts, it's because they really think about the entity, right? We just describe something that we're thinking about as endemic corruption. We will describe it as that, right? If you work in there and they tell you, well, boy, you got to take a cut salary, or we're going to have to let go a quarter of the workforce, some of which could be your family, it could be a spouse, it could be your own child, or it could be a parent. Things that it was a company like that had a lot of people who knew each other. And say, yeah, boy, we're let go in these people for profitability. But then you see them making the same exact bad decisions. Why would you agree to it? I mean, it might sound real superficial, but if you're there and you're sitting at that point in time and you're thinking about, well, yeah, boy, I got to make a sacrifice or a big sacrifice, let me say something large, but you don't trust that they're going to do the right thing with the money. And this going back to basically what we was talking about, they're saying, okay, it's supposed to make money, right? Supposed to be profitable. We don't have a history in this country of the government using money responsibly, governments in general. It doesn't matter who in power. I mean,
Yet,
cultural.
Navin, let me put this plug here one time. Yet, Trinidad is the most profitable island in the Caribbean. Our debt to GDP ratio is 65%, whereas almost every island across the Caribbean is over 100%.
Lassie love that structure though, right? Lassie,
Navin,
the GDP ratio.
It will be remiss of me to allow you to say that we didn't address what the purpose of union. So let me touch on that very quickly. Simple one word: to regulate. To regulate. People take for granted that things like pension plans, medical plans, overtime, premium time, maternity leave, paternity leave, vacation, sick leave, the 8-hour work week, the 40-hour work week, the OSH Act that governs the safety on work, Retirement Severance Benefit Act, Maternity Benefit Act, and I could go on and on and on, was just given to workers. Is unions. Unions was responsible for us having that, and some of us taking it for granted today. So,
and then on the flip side, there would be those who would abuse some of the privileges that came with union. That's just the flip side of it.
But correct. Again, that's why we pay management. That is why we pay management big money.
Right, exactly.
If you manage it properly,
I could talk from being a member.
You manage it.
I'm a union member, a tutor. And within the education system, you can see so much that, there's a whole other episode by itself if ever we get into that. Maybe I might have to sit out that one. But I really, when you really look at it, is so much I could see just in education that just, is make a scratch your head as to what the people on top who's supposed to really be, who making, anyhow, let me stop talking. Good discussion. How does Petrotrin's closure compare with Caroni and Titan methanol plant? Are there any similarities? Anybody?
I'll start here, and then Timo could probably pick up the second part. In Petrotrin and Caroni actually are real parallels. I will say it is extremely similar to Caroni. We had I started talking about a legacy asset. So you had your expenses, you had things you needed to rehabilitate. Get into too much debt through whatever reason, be it bad decisions, bad financing, improper project management, whatever these things are. And then you kick the can down the road every 5 years. Every 5 years, you see that can and say, boy, I'm not dealing with this. And you kick it down for the next 5, and for the next 5, and for the next 5, until you break it. And that is effective. In my mind, that is what happened with Caroni. Now, it might have people in this chat who don't even know what Caroni is, but on a personal level, it would be very upsetting. I was often passed by St. Madeleine, and it would be very upsetting to pass Point Up here and see the same thing in 10 years.
Right.
Titan, I think, is a different thing.
The parallels with Petrotrin and Caroni is mismanagement, and obviously shifting the blame, making all the union to be this bad thing and the workers to be greedy. Is the same thing happened with Caroni, happened with Petrotrin.
Exactly. And us not having the sugar industry still function in some way is a tragedy.
Restructuring again, the discussion of restructuring. Yeah. Restructuring. I don't think any sensible person would be opposed to you restructuring something for it to work. I don't think so. But close it down.
Yeah.
We are at the point in time, close it down. We are oil and gas.
Yeah, don't worry. They go build a HGC development on Caroni lands. You understand? That's the kick the barrels on the road mentality.
We are going in robust construction projects to boost the economy. Why should we be even talking about fossil fuel when the rest of the world is talking renewable? Ramuta Ramsarup. Why should we even be talking fossil fuel? Again, I think Navin touched on that. Navin, you can probably get into that quickly.
Yeah. So I'll try to be real quick. Two things. One, we dependent on fossil fuels to continue our economy, right? On some level, it will always play a part. As long as it happens in this country, it's there to be exported, and we should do it, or refined into product, or whatever it is we decide to do with it. Right, Irvin make a good point there about commodity markets. They play an integral role in commodity markets. And the truth is, I shouldn't say truth, I'm not a renewable energy expert, but the future energy going to be a mix. And we have Trinidad, again, we have a real unique opportunity to put ourselves very much forward in this if we get the right measures in place, if we get proper government support, if we get the right policies in place. We live in a world where you have, think about this. If you have a protected piece of forest in the Amazon or in Africa and you sign up, you could trade carbon credits and earn money from it. Now, we in Trinidad used to actually do carbon sequestration and reinjection. Somebody from the upstream could talk a bit more about it. We actually used to do that. There's the kind of technologies you're talking about now that could very well save us with this 1.5 degree that we need to hit, right? Direct air capture could be a thing in Trinidad. DAC and sequestering carbon is another thing we could look at. So we have opportunity if we have the will. And the thing is, we're really unique in that, yes, we need to have renewable energies as part of the power generation mix. That's for sure, no question about it. But we also need to make the most efficient and the safest use of the resources we have.
I would still just want to add in that fellas, we spend a lot of time unpacking the reality of Petrotrin, and I think a lot of people learn from what we were talking about. But we do have to have another show to really talk about possible options in the future. And renewables is a very complex topic. I would say, though, that there's a lot of different market forces that govern renewables. We know Biden and they're talking about transitioning to fully renewables in the next 55 years, but there's a lot of complexities about doing that in Trinidad. So I wouldn't want people to just go away thinking, well, renewables is the solution for everything. It's a very complex
it's complicated
thing. So I mean, I would say that we would give the commitment. I know quite a few of them. We give the commitment that we're definitely gonna do a renewable show in the near future.
Noted. Did OWT get too powerful over the decades to the point that management could not institute changes? Anybody? Timo?
OWTU is and has always been a powerful organization. But at the end of the day, let me put something in perspective. If management is doing what they're supposed to do, whether or not a union is powerful or not, then there is not going to be any issue for the union and the management to be pulling and tugging. If you're managing an entity properly, there's very little a union can do it. And that is factual.
True, because then there's not that avenue for a case to be made for the kind of things that is be happening. You understand? And it is what it is. I graduated as a process engineer in 2010, but could not secure a job in the field. Now I am a teacher and mass of students want to pursue this degree. Should I encourage or discourage students in getting into the field, given the current state of the economy? Navin.
Okay, so it is a hard question to answer because
that's a tough one.
It's a tough one because to be completely honest, you shouldn't be making a decision for where you want to pursue, the rest of your life looking only at the current state of the economy. It would trying to look into the future. I know that's a super hard thing to do at 17, 18 years. I mean, I myself would sit down and think, wait, is this what I really wanted to do sometimes? As it turned out, yes. But in terms of, if you're thinking solely about Trinidad, I honestly feel our energy industry in decline, and I'm not sure if we're going to have a long-term future. We will always have a long-term future. I'm not necessarily sure it's going to have a employable future for a new grad who going to come out in 2 or 3 years. Like, you might get a training opportunity and then you have to figure yourself out from there. That said, I wouldn't discourage somebody who thinking globally to not do it. If you feel, because in Trinidad, process engineering pretty much limited to the energy industry. Outside, it have pharmaceuticals, it have bioengineering, it have some extent it have a role in renewables. It have a whole heap of other things you could do. So that's kind of where my mindset is with it now.
Thanks for that insight there, Navin. So Fawi, you answer there, Fawi. Don't discourage youths, Fawi. Come on. Yeah, Tebo. Right. Oh, no, we back to
Rajiv, what's some attention?
Yes.
Yes. Looking for attention.
We
I
want
thought we should have come on the show and talk.
We want to end up on our bank here. Right.
Yeah.
Oil and gas is not a guarantee for prosperity. Which third world country in oil and gas is a prosperous country?
Oh gosh.
Somebody.
Let me just do my preliminary answer. Think about the Emirates 20 years ago and Qatar 15 years ago. Them was fishing and catching pearls for a living. I
have nothing to say again. I done.
No, I could deal with it. Right? So, first off, the amount of questions you asking, next time, come on the show. You understand what I'm saying? Come on the show and talk, and we could deal with that. You understand? Next thing is to say which third world oil country in oil and gas is a prosperous country. The prosperity of the whole Middle East. Middle East is first world countries. I thought a lot of them is third world. But again, you see, oil is a very volatile commodity. So as that profitability goes up, the entire industry could go with it depending on your reserves. As we see in with Guyana looking at close to 200 years of prosperity ahead of them. You understand? Because of the size of that field. Now, it's not that we're saying, I like that one. It's not that I'm saying that oil and gas is the only future. Trinidad has positioned itself where they're very strong financially, where a lot of international agencies will be willing to lend Trinidad money to invest in a lot of different industries. But it's a matter of having what they call a bankable program, and we will talk a little more about that another time. But at the end of the day, no industry is guaranteed for prosperity. But at the end of the day, you have to know when to ride the wave. And Trinidad in a lot of areas has strong infrastructure whereby they could ride that wave should things look to get better. Of course, we're coming out of the pandemic, which is a very unique, stressing situation for the economy. But to me, by deciding to put the refinery in the position that we're in, we damage our own infrastructure and put ourselves in a much less agile position in CARICOM to be able to now diversify into other areas.
So I'm
touching on that point of diversification. Over the years, we would have made a lot of money off our oil and gas. But the reality is that, and I'm being straightforward and frank, majority of the time we had lazy politicians who couldn't think outside the box, who couldn't take the money that people was making and make it work for the country. And that's the reason why we the position we in right now. And people continue to miss that point, to miss that point.
Navin, any closing remarks on this question here?
Yeah, two things. I agree with three things. I agree with both Timo and Leslie here. You had to ride the wave, but you had to know when the wave going to crash. And you have to learn to we should have used that money from 15, 20 years ago to really invest in future industries. Like, even them just probably get fed up by hearing me say this. I could never understand why Trinidad do have advanced computing as an industry. Why we didn't have data center. We have cheap power. Yes, it's hot, but we have cheap power. Why we didn't use the money to go forward? Instead, the money honestly didn't go that far. It didn't do much for us. So that's one thing. Overall, I genuinely hope that the refinery comes back. Whether or not I'll be a part of it, neither here nor there for me, is more that I think my experience there was good. No matter what happened, it was positive. And I will always be happy for the time I spend there. It makes me into a better engineer. And I feel like I learned real plenty from my time there. And I don't think it have anybody at all, no matter how sour as they was towards Petrotrin, no matter how much somebody think Petrotrin is a useless asset, it make them into the person they are today when they were employed there, and they shouldn't forget it. And secondly, I forgot to say this at the beginning. Happy International Women in Engineering Day to all the female engineers out there.
Big up, man.
Big up the woman in science, man. Big up the woman in science.
That's right.
And on that positive note, I want to bring today's episode to close. I think that last question posed by Rajiv there was one that kind of encapsulated a lot of the final thoughts that we could end on tonight. I want to thank everyone for all their insight. I know that Brother Rajiv would hold us to that. Well, we will hold him to that, and we will have him on our next day. He almost made it to this one, but there was a bit of a ambiguity as to where we was really going with this one. But I think now that we've lifted off from here, from this platform, right, that we could actually look to a part 2 in the next quarter. So thank you so much, everybody, for your time, for listening to our insight and so on this issue. I see there's some people here who was asking questions earlier as to why we're doing the episode, but they seem to have enjoyed it. I see they were wrong. People, I would just close on my little non-industry man note and say that we really, if we keep asking ourselves and telling ourselves that, well, that this didn't make no sense. What better you want? Corrupt Trinidad can be better than what we really leaving for our children, really and truly. You understand? If we keep saying why we talking about what's the point? Trinidad corrupt. Yeah. What are we really trying to say? That
we have to be changed, man.
Exactly. And I mean, yes, it's easy to say, and there's the next thing to do, and that is annexing to our culture. We have a culture of talk and not action, right? But my comrades on the screen here, and my comrades in the chat, right? The days will come for action, and we hope that everybody could put their lack of money where their mouth is. All right.
We go form a union, Cutter. Don't worry, all of it in the union.
Well, let us join my union, man.
And yes, the third world oil curse is a reality too. We do know the third world oil curse is a reality, just like what our neighbors have experienced, but at the end of the day, we have to look we have to look towards breaking it. We have to look towards breaking it. But anyway, people are, hey, Lalcha is seen, brother. And Baboolal, I see a lot of men from the we need men from that year above me. I don't see these men. I don't see these men at all. In Navin, you bring out the men. All right. So the brothers, okay. So Taurean, come on the screen before we go now, man. Let me see.
Yeah. So let's thank Navin, man. I really enjoyed this.
Yeah, man, Timo, we'll have you again for sure. We'll have you again for sure. And we'll get Taurean and shadow ban. We can see you. We'll try to see shadow ban.
I want nobody see my bullet payment. You have to keep it on the low.
Yeah. So, Timo and Navin, thank you all so much. I know we are going to have you all back on the show in the next quarter, definitely. And I want to thank you all once again for all your input and all the questions. And we are going to have another cut-in episode next week dealing with LGBTQ rights in TNT. We are going to have, I would say, a groundbreaking interview and also discussion on the LGBTQ community in TNT. So look out for that, people. From all of us here in the Heights Room, big up all yourself.
Big up all yourself. Watch the mafia. Don't forget.
The mafia. Look out for the mafia. Blessed. Thanks, fellas.
Thanks, everyone.
Later. Bless.